And we heard earlier today that Labor is doubling down on health, promising Australians will have access to free after-hours telehealth services if re-elected. The Prime Minister is planning on rebranding Health Direct into 1800 Medicare. Joining us live is Independent MP for Warringah, Zali Steggall. Thank you and good afternoon to you, Zali. So what did you think of the Prime Minister's announcement today?
Obviously be wanting to see a lot more detail around how that's going to be rolled out and who it's going to apply to. Will it be just GPs? Will it include nurse practitioners? I think it is essential, though, that Australians have access to health services, no matter where they are or their circumstances. And we know, for example, the free health clinics are not everywhere, but also people in more regional and rural communities don't have the facilities available to them that our urban areas do. So, look, I'll be keen to understand more detail around what the Labor proposal is, and obviously the costings and how we're going to make it work.
Medicare has been a huge, issue and announcement, I should say, for the Prime Minister, and he did say today that a vote for Labor is a vote for Medicare. We just spoke to Dr Anne Webster, the Shadow Assistant Minister for Regional Health, and she said that the coalition is matching what Labor has announced regarding this announcement. So who do you support if you need to, if it's a hung parliament?
Look, obviously, that question of minority government, of power sharing, it will be about, I will look to the merits and obviously the will of the Australian people, who will be in a position to form stable government and ultimately be true to my community of Warringah and the issues that I have pledged to champion. Look, I think this campaign has been, along usual lines. Labor has gone around health and Medicare, matched, of course, by the coalition, and then the coalition come back and do the big announcements on defence. I think it's been an interesting campaign from the two major parties, because one of the areas we haven't heard nothing from them, for example, has been around climate risk, what we're going to do on a lot of other issues. So it's been a little bit of a typical campaign from the two major parties, I have to say, when it comes to the announcements and the pledges that they've made.
Certainly with energy, nuclear has been a divisive topic in the election. Here is a short clip of Opposition Leader Peter Dutton a short time ago.
In relation to how we firm up renewables through our nuclear policy, we have looked at the top 20 economies in the world. 19 of them have already or have signed up to zero emissions, much cheaper, more reliable nuclear energy. That's what those 19 countries have done.
Certainly the cost has been a big factor regarding nuclear, but is costing really difficult because it's currently banned?
The question of the ban that's the issue. It's actually just the historical costs around nuclear. The key issues are cost, that it is water use as well, and then the question of waste. So there are a number of areas of concern when it comes to nuclear. I think what Peter Dutton doesn't outline in that clip or in his speech is the countries that have nuclear have had nuclear for a long time. They have had nuclear for some 30, 40 years, which means it's a mature technology, well established. They have the workforce and the regulatory framework to allow for it. These are all part of the problems for Australia. We simply don't have that framework in place. And we've got a window of the next 10 years in which we need to transition the bulk of our energy production to as lower emission as possible, which is the renewable, rooftop solar and wind. And it's just not feasible. No one believes that, for example, nuclear can be done in the time frame in which we need it, which is the next 10 to 15 years. Now, if new technology or developments in nuclear were to come online for that final 5 to 10% of energy mix down the road, that is something that can be considered. But the reality is, and Peter Dutton and the coalition are just still not prepared to engage. Climate change and climate risk means we need low emission energy production. We need it now, at pace, and their nuclear plan relies on more coal and gas to be burnt for the next 10 to 15 years. And we simply cannot afford that kind of pollution for longer.
Yeah, you make some really good points, and I know climate is a big passion of yours, and I respect that you say that we have a very fast need to get to the lower emissions. But I would argue as well, I spoke to a nuclear law lecturer at the University of Adelaide, and she has said that water is a public perception concern, not a technical problem. She said water is preferred as a coolant because it's cheap and effective, but there are alternatives if needed, like recycled water. And you also mentioned, that if technology changes, that potentially we could bring it in. So is it about lifting the bans? Because it looks like water is potentially not an issue, and cost could be an issue. But if we don't lift those bans, would you say we're not really going to know these questions?
No, but I don't agree with that argument, because the reality is other countries around the world, as we know, have nuclear and are progressing those technologies. The difficulty is nuclear is not growing in percentage share of energy production around the world. In fact, it's stagnant, if not decreasing, because of those issues. The cost, the where it has to be located for that water use, it is generally coastal, and then the waste question. So these are all massive hurdles for Australia, and it sort of also doesn't really make sense where we want to have the lowest cost energy production. We want Australians to be able to access it. We need our manufacturing to be able to access low-cost energy. And all of the evidence points towards renewables. So it's kind of really an ideological kind of, blind spot for the coalition, that they're simply not willing to embrace the opportunity of Australia. And what we have as a continent, we have so much capacity. It's really quite incredible that we still have so much debate. But what we're finding is part of the climate denialism is actually trying to raise sort of energy wars around what type of energy we use, rather than talking about the cause and the reason being the need to reduce emissions and climate. Because for Australians,
nuclear has
risk
zero
is
emissions.
increasing. Well, I know the coalition like their their media grab of saying zero emissions nuclear. Nuclear is zero emissions from a CO2 point of view. It is not a waste-free, problem-free energy production. It simply is not on
par. But I would argue that
other forms of energy.
Any form of energy has its flaws, would you say?
Absolutely. And what we know, for example, large-scale wind turbines are now up to about 80 to 90% recyclable. The goal is for 100. Same solar panels, very valuable components. And so more and more production of recycling is there. And same for batteries. So we want to make sure we focus on technologies that have good circularity and recycling capacity.
We've got to go, Zali, but one thing that I've been investigating is energy from waste facilities, and there are 10 across the country. I'm doing more and more research on this, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, because I know that you are a climate leader, but some of these experts that I'm talking to are saying that they're emitting, these incinerators, more climate pollution than coal and gas. So we've got to go, but that's certainly one in Parks, and they're banned in the ACT, but it's certainly something that we're looking closely at here, Zali. But less than a week to go, but thank you very much. Good luck, and we will talk to you very soon.
Thank you.